Hello, hello, you guys. Welcome back to Let's Vibe Podcast. In today's episode, we are talking about how to have an alcohol-free festival season. This is the most requested topic I have gotten. And so in today's episode, we are just going to go over some tangible tips on how to have an alcohol-free festival season. I also answer some of your guys' questions about my journey with it. So without further ado, let's get into it. And of course, I would just love to start this episode with a little bit of a disclaimer. I am not a formal, therapist or trained coach or anything like that when it comes to alcohol support. I have never done AA, been in AA, or anything like that. So this is really just off of my personal experience. And I would just love to start out this episode by saying, take what resonates, leave what doesn't. This is just purely off of, the things that I've done with my own journey. And maybe some of you can relate to it and resonate with it, and you can try out some of these tips for yourself. But I really just will be talking about what's worked for me, and it might not work for everyone. And of course, if you are someone that is really struggling with alcohol, there are resources for you that might be better suited for you. I'm purely talking about my experience as someone who, wasn't having too severe of a problem, but it was a slippery slope, and I just did not like the times that I engaged with alcohol. So I decided to remove it from my life. So I just want to start out this episode with that little bit of a disclaimer. And, we'll go into a little bit of my background and everything like that, my story with it. And then I have some tangible steps to really help support you if you are interested in having an alcohol-free festival season. And then, like I said, we'll end with some questions and wrap this episode up. So that's what you can really expect from today's episode. And so kicking it off, let's talk a little bit about my background and my story. So for those that don't know, I did remove alcohol from my life. I was sober from alcohol for a year and a half. And I always say sober from alcohol because, I did dabble in some other things lightly, meaning weed. And that's about it, right? And, I take more of those like little microdose of mushrooms, like the legal kind, right? And so that's why I say sober from alcohol. And I would say that was the one that I needed to be sober from the most, because all the other ones I'm able to have a healthy relationship with. I had started drinking in college. I went to Arizona State, and as much as we would love to say we don't fall in that stereotype of being the number one party school, but we definitely do, and we did. And I definitely fell victim to that mentality in college of going out and drinking and it being very normalized to go out and black out and be hungover and all of those things. And so I feel like I drank because it was like the cool thing, and it allowed me to be more outgoing. It allowed me to be more accepted and all of those things, right? And so coming out of college, I always struggled with finding that balance of drinking, as much as I would be like, okay, I'm only going to have like a few drinks tonight. There was just something that I couldn't control it. And I never really drank during the week, coming out of post-grad, right? Like coming into the adult world, I kept everything to the weekends. And it was kind of like I would look forward to the weekend to go out and drink. And then I would be hungover the next day and I would make bad choices or whatever. And so it was one of those things that I just like could never really get a handle on. And even at festivals, I would drink here and there, but I never went overboard really at festivals. Like I can count on my hand how many times I kind of went overboard with the drinking at a festival, like one hand. But when it came to going out, like I just could not, I had no self-control basically. I was trying to find that balance, and it wasn't until I was about to turn, I'm turning 29 this year. So I think it was going into my 27th birthday where I kind of was just like, I had one of those nights, like I had this balance of like, okay, I'm not going to go overboard with the drinking. Like I'm going to pick my moments, that kind of thing. And like, I had taken breaks from alcohol before. Like I would go like 3 months or something going into like the new year, or like I would do dry January, or like I would always kind of go 3 months or 4 months, and then I would always find my way back to drinking. It was 2022 where I went out with friends, and it was the week before my birthday, and it was one of those things. So I was turning 27, and we went out to a show, And that night got very blurry. I definitely overdid it. And I overdid it to the point where I was hungover for 2 days straight. And it was like a really bad hangover. I could just tell my body was not feeling well. And I was really questioning, why am I partaking in this? Why am I doing this to myself? Also, I'm like a leader for women. I coach women. Like I do all of these amazing things, but I'm not following through on those things for myself. Like I'm making these choices and I have this habit. And, so I decided going into my 27th birthday that I was going to like not drink as much basically. And I decided I didn't fully commit to being sober really, but we had gone to EDC Las Vegas. I did EDC Las Vegas completely sober 2022. And then we went to like a couple shows. I did those sober. And then I went to Electric Forest, did that sober. And then anytime I did drink, I kind of had like one drink and that was it. And even at Electric Forest, I only had, a seltzer one of the days. And then I had a drink the last day. And the last day of Electric Forest, I've talked about this story before, but we witnessed a very serious and scary medical emergency. And even though that was more like drug related, seeing something like that definitely kind of just like it wakes you up a little bit. So I had a drink with my ex as we were kind of like decompressing from that like medical situation. And it was at Electric Forest on that last day that I decided that I was going to remove alcohol entirely. I was just going to go sober completely. And so that's kind of what kicked off this whole thing. Fast forward, I went a year and a half without drinking alcohol, which was pretty amazing. So I ended up going the rest of 2022, then all of 2023, I didn't drink alcohol. And then it was the end of 2023 that I was like, you know what? I'm kind of curious. I've done a lot of healing and inner work. Like, I wonder what it looks like to invite alcohol back into my life. And at first I was completely like, no, I'm never going to do it. But then I'm like, you know what? Like, let me just see, right? Like, I'm just curious, is the thing. And so on New Year's Eve with my ex, I did have a glass of wine and I absolutely hated it. My head was hurting. I was like, okay, maybe I'm good. You know what I mean? And then it wasn't until Groove Cruise that we went to a teppanyaki dinner and I kind of wanted like a little drink with that meal that I was like, all right, let's just see what happens. And with Groove Cruise, I was very much in control and I just had little sips of like tequila Red Bulls here and there with my ex whenever he got a drink. And I had a pina colada on the island day. And that was like really it. I never got drunk, never got hungover. And I was kind of like, all right, like it's kind of nice to just have some intention with it, right? And for me, it was really about like, what was the reason why I was drinking? And it really was because I liked the feeling of it. I feel like I was more outgoing. Like there was like a lot of like identity reasons why I did it. And I feel like in that time of being sober, I got very comfortable with being who I am and not caring what image I was portraying. And I got more comfortable with myself. And I feel like when I invited alcohol back in, it's like, oh, like I feel like I did the work that needed to be done, but it still can be a very slippery slope because alcohol can still be fun. So that's kind of like where I'm at now. Right now, I'm not drinking. I have like some fitness goals and things that I want to do. I also just really want to feel my best this festival season. After Groove Cruise, I did have like a month in February where I was drinking a little bit more regularly. And it was fun. We had a good time. It was a nice little bit of a distraction from the breakup and the healing that I was going through and all of that. And that was probably one of the harder things when I was sober, was like when life things happened, like having to confront those things and deal with it and not numb yourself out. But yeah, February, I just dabbled in it a little bit more, like went to Galentine's, hung out with my coworkers, like we would grab a drink. And like, I feel like for me, it was just like kind of like about the intention really behind it. But even now I feel like with shows and festivals, like I truly don't need it. So I think I'm remaining the same there, that I really don't need alcohol or anything like that for shows and festivals. And I got by just fine a whole year and a half of going to festivals and shows, not drinking. And so I'll talk about, some of the things that really helped me in that time, but that's just like a little bit of like my story and backstory with this. And even now, like I said, it's just like about the intention. And I'm in a little bit more of a sober period, but I'm not really like counting days or anything like that. I'm kind of just intuitively going with it, but I am really proud of myself for going that year and a half not drinking. And I know I made past versions of me very proud, because I didn't even have alcohol until I was like 18 or 19 when I went to college, right? Like I didn't get invited to the parties or like do anything like that. Like I was very much a good girl growing up. In order for you to maybe explore this and have an alcohol-free festival season, or going to shows and just exploring sobriety a little bit more, I wanted to kind of go into some tangible steps, just some of the things that I found really helpful for me. And hopefully this helps you. And if you have any questions, you can definitely reach out to me and let me know. But hopefully this will be a good starter for you to maybe start thinking about, your relationship with alcohol and how you can really approach this, and finding what's going to work best for you. And so the first tip that I have is I really want you to explore giving sobriety alcohol-free a test run. And what I mean by that is giving yourself a window of time to be alcohol-free. And it doesn't have to include with a festival. This can be just like if you're in a little bit of a break between festivals or between shows, giving yourself 2 to 3 weeks to not drink alcohol. And this means like not during the week, not during the weekends, no alcohol. And I say 2 to 3 weeks because the first week is initially, kind of weird at first, but then it's like once you get to week 2, you kind of get more comfortable. And then by week 3, you're like really feeling the effects of not drinking. And so if you're able to give yourself that, and if that feels like too much, just start out with not doing it for a weekend, right? Or not doing it for a week, and then build upon it from there. And in that trial period, you can really start to notice how you're feeling, checking in with yourself. How are you feeling without it? How do social situations feel without it? Do you feel awkward? Do you feel uncomfortable? And that just really allows you to kind of like go deeper and maybe see like, what does your relationship look like with alcohol, which is going to be my second tip, is like really identifying your relationship with alcohol. What does alcohol do for you? Is it numbing you out? Is it a crutch? Does it allow you to be more social, more outgoing? Is it portraying an image of you that you want it to portray or not want it to portray? And so by giving it a trial run, it just really allows you to see, okay, what does my life look like without alcohol? What does it look like when my social events aren't surrounded by alcohol or planned around alcohol? Like I feel like when I was in college, like everything revolved around drinking at a certain point, right? Especially my senior year was so bad. And so you really want to give it a trial period just to see how you feel without alcohol and really start to explore. And I would say to explore this time and space with the utmost compassion and grace for yourself, because it might be hard and it might be difficult. And this is a very personal journey as well. That's why I put this disclaimer at the beginning that like, I'm not the expert here, and I'm just really sharing from my experience what I've found. And it can be very challenging. And like I said, if you are someone that, 3 weeks feels like really tough, then there might be something more at play here. If you're someone that is, drinking pretty regularly, right? Then there might be some resources or things that you need to tap into to get more of that support that way. But if you're more like me, where it's like you weren't really drinking during the week, but it's like on the weekends, you would just go hard and not even really mean to go hard, And so this trial run can be difficult. And in this period, if you have alcohol in your home, you might want to like stow it away or give it to a friend temporarily. Like you want to like make it easy for you to navigate that trial period. And so that way you can really feel out and see, how does your life look like without alcohol? How are you feeling? How are you doing? And then really get into the introspection of why do you have this relationship with alcohol, and really exploring without judgment, what do you get from alcohol? What does that look like for you? And so you can really kind of like reflect on that, journal on that, maybe think back to like when you first started having these habits and things like that with your drinking, and really utilizing that time to identify it, because once you identify the relationship with alcohol, you might need to find the way to supplement that. So for example, like for me, I felt like I needed to be more outgoing, or I needed to look a certain way, or be portrayed a certain way. And so to combat that, I had to do more healing and identity work with being comfortable and confident in who I am. So that way I wasn't using alcohol to like portray someone that I wasn't, if that makes sense. So like if you're using alcohol to numb out, then it's like, okay, finding other ways to not necessarily numb out, but to provide comfort to you when you are wanting that feeling, right? So it's kind of like finding your relationship to alcohol, and the reason why you drink alcohol will allow you to find something that can like heal that when you are not drinking alcohol, if that makes any sense at all. Okay, so like I said, tip number 1, give yourself that trial run. Tip number 2, identify your relationship with alcohol and really start to get down to like why you drink alcohol, what are your drinking habits with it, and really have some of that introspection time. And then also starting to notice how you feel without alcohol within that trial period. And then I feel like you can really, once you have that trial period, you might get to that point where you're like, oh no, I can invite alcohol back in, I'm good. Or you might be like, okay, it's time to kind of like extend this and see how far I want to take it, right? How long do I want to go sober for? I have found that for me, I didn't really want to set a deadline to that. I kind of was just like, let's just explore this. And then I kind of like feeled it out when I wanted to come out of my sobriety. And so for you, if it feels better for you to have a deadline of like, no, I'm going to go sober for 3 months, or I'm going to go sober for 6 months, or I'm going to go sober for the whole year, you can definitely do that. Or if you want to be more intuitive about it of like, let's just like feel it out, then you can do that as well. And maybe incrementally like push out a deadline for yourself could be really helpful. The next thing that I found really helpful when it came to being alcohol free was finding other alternatives, as well as leaning on support and having some accountability. And so with alternatives, a lot of the questions were like, okay, you don't drink, but do you do other things? And it's like, yes, I dabble in some other things, but I wasn't replacing that, if that makes sense. I have a very low tolerance for weed. So like if I went to a show and I had like a little hit of something, like that was that. But like more times than not, I wasn't interchanging these things. It's not like I traded alcohol for weed or like other things, right? Like I went to shows and festivals completely sober and didn't trade it for anything. And so how I kind of got by was like caffeine. I'm sensitive to caffeine. So yes, that's probably not the best for my heart, but that's how I was able to stay up, was just, leaning on caffeine. Like, and I figured out how to time it. Like I might have some caffeine at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon if there's a show that night. And so then I'll go to the show and I won't like, I'll just drink water, or like at Concourse Project, they have mocktail alternatives, which is really great. So like I'll have one of those. And then by the time 2 p.m. comes around, I'm like ready for bed. So I figured out ways to time it to where I'm not having like a Red Bull at like 11 o'clock at night and then I'm going to be up the rest of the night. Like I've kind of figured out little things like that. And I've also found like making sure I'm eating full meals, especially at music festivals, is super important. That helps keep my energy up. And then also, dabbling with like caffeine of some sort at festivals really helps. So you want to maybe find some of those alternatives that will allow you to, of course, stay awake for some of these shows and festivals. And then finding alternatives, like if at your local bar or your favorite restaurant you go to, they have mocktails or things like that. Or if you're going to a pregame with friends, or you're camping at your campgrounds, like having your own canned mocktails, or like some type of like juice or mocktail kind of like situation that you can make yourself, right? I find that to be helpful, because a lot of the times, especially at shows, we just want to be like holding something, you know what I mean? Like we've gotten used to holding something, other people are holding something. But I feel like I was more aware of that when I would go to like a bar, or like go to like, like a bar or like a cocktail bar or like something like that. But like at shows, like I got really used to not holding on to anything unless it was like water, right? Or like a little energy drink or something. So you have to definitely find some alternatives and find what's going to work best for you. And you want to maybe like experiment with that a little bit more. So that's like my fourth tip is like experimenting with like what's going to work best for you when it comes to shows and pre-games and festivals and things like that. And also experimenting with the identity that you don't drink alcohol. This is one of the tips that I got from a friend is like when someone asks you like, oh, do you want a drink? Instead of saying I'm not drinking, you say I don't drink or I'm not a drinker. And it's such a simple psychology kind of thing. And the reason for that is because when it comes to your identity, like people can't really question that. But when we say like, I'm not drinking, it's just the action that you're not doing. And so sometimes people think that means that they can like persuade you to not drink. It might mean like, oh, but they're not drinking tonight, right? But they might drink tomorrow, or like, why aren't you drinking tonight? You know, if you say like, I'm not a big drinker, I'm not a drinker, you kind of make it more about that, or I don't drink. That's more like definitive, right? It kind of tells the person, oh, they're not a drinker. That's like a part of them. That's their identity. I'm not going to bother them or like pressure them into drinking, you know? And I will say, like I talked about accountability, like leaning on your friends and support system who are going to be those people that help you, like was huge for me. Like I'm so glad my ex like was able to support me during this time, and he was totally there for me. Because he understood why I didn't want to drink. Like I didn't like how I felt after. I was always anxious, like all those kinds of things. And like, it was really great to have his support during that time. And like, I had a lot of friends that were also exploring this that I could lean on. So it was really nice in those cases to like lean on those people. And it's like, if you feel like you don't have the people to support you in this journey, then like they might not be your people, you know, like if you feel like in your rave fam, you can't stop drinking because so-and-so is going to make you feel guilty, or it's going to make you feel bad, or it's going to peer pressure you or whatever. Like those are not the people to have in your life. Like I feel like I need to do like a rave fam, like boundaries and like red flags or something, because some of the stories I hear is just like crazy, and it's like pressuring people to drink or like do substances or like things like that is just like not the vibe, you know? And I tend to find that people will egg other people on so that they can feel comforted by their own use. And you don't need to be the person that does that for someone else, you know? They need to like reflect on that themselves. And you don't need to be the person that comforts their habits and supports their habits, basically. You know what I mean? So yeah, in this time, you're really going to just like experiment with like what's going to work best for you and how you portray this to people. And it's okay if it doesn't look perfect. It's okay if it's a little messy. It's okay if you make mistakes in this time. And it's not going to be easy by any means. There was definitely some hard points for me. Like I said, the hardest part wasn't going to raves and festivals. It honestly was the times where I was really going through some shit and I felt like, man, I just really want to drink, you know? Like that was probably the hardest part, was not succumbing to those moments for some temporary feeling or temporary relief. And I had to find other ways to navigate those things. But even if it was just crying to my mom, you know, or just like getting mad or getting angry, like I had to find other ways to channel those things, to like heal those things other than just numbing out and drinking, you know? So definitely give yourself like some grace in this time period, because it's not easy. That's for sure. Like it's not a walk in the park, right? And like, especially when a lot of people are still drinking, like it's not easy to be the one that's like, no, I'm not going to drink. I'm not doing it. Like it's a really hard path to choose, but you have to remind yourself why you're doing it. And so even with this time of like learning more about your relationship with alcohol and giving it a trial run, you'll soon have a list of reasons why you're going to continue to not drinking. You're going to have that why. And that's just something that you're just going to keep coming back to. And like, you're just forming a new habit basically to not drink, and you're forming the new identity of you not being a drinker. And it's just going to come with time to get more comfortable with it, to get better at saying why you don't drink, to be in different social situations and not drink. it all just comes with time. And so I just really encourage you to give yourself grace, because it might not look perfect. You might say you're not drinking and then you might have a slip up, and like, it's okay if you have a slip up, and give yourself grace and just know that like you're human and it's okay. And you bounce back, you take the lessons and the learnings and you see like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have approached it this way, and you do it a different way, And that's really like the final kind of tip I have. And then we'll go into some questions, is just really to give yourself some grace and find the pros about it. One of the things that I was reminded of, I don't know if this was a quote for someone from somewhere else or if I just thought of this on my own, but like, a lot of the times we think that by giving up alcohol, we're like removing something from our life. And so we think about it in the scarcity mindset of like, oh, I don't have this in my life, I'm removing it from my life. And like, it feels very like, oh, I just want to drink because I don't have it, But I encourage you to view it the opposite way, that like when you don't drink, you get to wake up on a Saturday morning without a hangover. You don't have to worry, oh, did I do this really cringe thing, or did I text him, or did I do this? You don't have to worry about that. You also don't spend as much money, right? You also get comfort in maybe being the DD for you and your friends. I was a DD a lot for my friends, and I'm so glad that I could be the person that gets them home safe every night. So instead of thinking that by giving up alcohol, you're losing this part of your life, but really think about what you're gaining by not drinking. And I think that's helped me so many times, just knowing I have the mental clarity, I don't have hangovers, my anxiety is not as bad. And having comfort in some of those things really kept me strong on those days where it was really hard to drink. Over time, your pros list is just going to get longer and longer. So maybe you start a note on your phone as to like why you gave up drinking and like what are the pros of it, just to continuously remind yourself of that. As you're going through, this festival season or going to shows, I really encourage you just to give it a try. Maybe start out with going to one show without drinking and see how it goes. Then maybe you try a festival, and instead of doing the full festival weekend, maybe you just do one day of the festival where you don't drink or partake in anything, and then just like kind of building it upon from there. But I do think that there's a value in starting exploring your sobriety outside of those spaces and then slowly introducing them. I always tell people, especially in that trial period, if you give up alcohol, don't go to the bar the next weekend, like don't plan to go out, just spend some time with yourself, find some other hobbies, go touch some grass, stuff like that when you're in that trial period. Like that would just be the most helpful. It's like you give up alcohol and then you go straight to a bar. Like props to those who could do it, but I couldn't do that, you're just tempting yourself even more. And so you kind of have to build up that list of why you don't want to drink and those pros and all of those things, then start inviting going to bars and shows and festivals and things like that. And the more you do it, the more you get comfortable with it. So it's gonna feel very uncomfortable at first, but I think if you just give yourself some room to try it out and have those conversations with the people in your life that you're exploring this, and really explore different alternatives and things like that you need for shows and festivals in order to stay up and things like that. And just giving yourself grace along the way. Like I said, it might not look perfect, but I think you just even thinking about giving up alcohol in some type of way is just an amazing thing. I know that there are a ton of health benefits to it. I'm not a doctor, but there's a ton of health benefits to it. And I really commend you for even listening to this episode and maybe even exploring it, and even just giving it a try one night out of the weekend, not drinking, is just a really big step and is really awesome. And there are so many alternatives, by the way, of like beer brands, mocktails, things like that. Like it's definitely growing within society and in our culture. So just know that you're really not alone. Like I feel like back in college, if I said I was giving up alcohol, like I would have looked crazy, and that was just a very different time. But I feel like the time we're in now, like it's definitely something people are exploring, and you're going to find people that are more aligned with you than you think, like I definitely expressed when I wasn't drinking, and so many people would be like, oh my God, that's so awesome. That's amazing. Like all of these really amazing things. So it's just, you got to dip your toes in and get a little comfortable after being a little uncomfortable, like it's just going to come with time and practice. Okay, let's wrap up with some questions that you guys submitted. So the first question is how do you manage going with people who drink? And honestly, like I manage it pretty well because my friends are great and they don't really overdo it. Like, I think that's probably like an age thing, like being 28 and a lot of my friends are around the same age as me or older. Like, my friends all know how to handle their stuff. And so it's really easy for me to navigate that. And it's also like, even if someone's having a little bit too much of a good time or a fun time, like it doesn't take away from my experience. I just want them to be okay and be safe. You know what I mean? So I feel like I handle it pretty well. And again, it's just about who you surround yourself with, right? And I saw another question like that. How do you handle going out with friends when everyone's drinking and you're not? That's my biggest struggle, being sober. Everyone was vibing and eventually got annoying, LMAO. So I'd rather just not go out. And I guess that's like choosing the environment that you're going to be in with your friends. Like, I don't go out to like the going out places here in Austin unless it's like a special occasion or I'm out with friends or coworkers. Like, it has to be a very special thing for me to go out to like West 6, right? Or go out to the East Side or like stuff like that. And so I kind of like pick my moments. And if you have friends that like, you know, only go out and you don't do other things with them, then that might be something to explore with them. And, you know, I would have friends being like, oh, do you want to go out, you know, here and here? And I'm like, oh, I'm not really going out or drinking. Like, what if we went to coffee instead? Or what if we went for a walk instead? Like, I would find other ways to hang out with them. And I'm not going to lie, sometimes you might lose friends in this case because you might realize that the only thing you had in common was drinking and the only thing you had in common was going out. I lost a lot of friends from college because that's the only common denominator we had was going out and drinking and blacking out and all of that, you know? So you might lose some friends in this process, but in a way, it just allows you to create space to find friends who do get it and who would support you and all of those things. So it's definitely tough, but I feel like I don't really allow how other people handle their stuff or do that stuff like really impact my experience unless it's truly impacting my experience, you know, where they're kind of like, I don't know, being nagging or annoying or on me or like anything like that. Which I kind of just have to remind myself, you know, they're drinking. I'm not. Like, that's probably why I'm more triggered or more annoyed, but that's okay. You know what I mean? Someone asked, how do you ease social anxiety / feel loose without alcohol? I'm not going to lie, caffeine does kind of help. Caffeine really helps. Also, like, when I say like the legal microdose, like I say like the legal microdose of mushrooms, meaning it's not like the actual kind of like psychedelic shrooms, but like there's some versions of that where that can be really helpful in kind of easing that. I also like, I'm not going to lie, I do some deep breathing. My camera's getting hot, so I need to wrap up this podcast episode soon. But yeah, I feel like the big thing with like easing the social anxiety, feeling loose, I know it's kind of counterintuitive because it's like alcohol or it's caffeine, you know what I mean? But I feel like that kind of helps me. And also the music, like the music, getting into it, like kind of those spaces really helps me. And again, this is kind of like tuning into the identity work and healing and mindset work I did around my drinking, where like I don't really get social anxiety anymore. Like, I feel like with social anxiety for me, like I get anxiety because I'm afraid to be myself, if that makes sense. Like I'm afraid that I won't be accepted or whatever it may be. And so I feel like I've really had to heal those parts of myself to where like I don't really get social anxiety unless it's like a new experience or something that I've never done before. And so I feel like healing and doing some of that inner work has also helped. But yeah, a little caffeine has also helped loosen me up, and like a little microdose too. Favorite non-alcoholic alternatives and why? I mean, I like I said, I do drink caffeine, but there's Kin Euphorics. That's one of my favorite brands. That's probably like my go-to brand out of all of them. And then sparkling water is also really great if that bar has it, like different brands of sparkling water. I can't think of really some of the other ones. There's Gia, GHIA, which is really good. There's this like Lyres, LYREE apostrophe S. That's really good. You can also try like different zero proof, like actual like tequila, but zero proof. I really do like the Heineken 0%. I really like that one. Those are kind of some of the ones I can think off of the top of my head. But yeah, I hate to say it, but I did trade alcohol for caffeine when it comes to going to shows and festivals, but that's just what works for me. Next question is, do you ever get freaked out by how messed up some people are when you're sober? Yeah, but I don't really like pay attention, to be quite honest. And like this even happened this past weekend at Concourse. Like I noticed some little roly-polies, and honestly, I kind of am like, I hope you're having a great time. Like, I love that for you. You're vibing, that kind of thing. But I try not to judge, honestly, because how people choose to experience their experience is, they have free will, right? I don't try to let it impact my time or my vibe. And I try not to focus on it because it's their experience. And like, I think once you fixate on it, then you will fixate on it and you'll be like, oh my God, everyone's on stuff. Right. But at the end of the day, it's people's choices. And so I just choose to be in control of my experience. And I'm like, you know what? I'm having a great time. I'm not going to let this get in my way. And like, if you're ever dealing with people where like they're kind of bumping into you or like whatever, like I've just had to remove myself or like step back or like go take a walk or go to a different part of the stage or something like that. And just try to not to like let it get in my vibe. But honestly, a year and a half of drinking, I can't even tell you specific instances where that happened, like I can't even think about any specific show or festival or set where I was just like, oh, like everyone around me was like that. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't really stick with you and you just kind of be in control of your experience and kind of just like move on. Okay. I struggle so much with raving fully sober, no drugs or alcohol. When people find out I'm sober, I feel like I'm looked at differently. Like I don't belong in the scene or like my presence is questioned. Have you ever found yourself feeling that way around non-sober ravers? How have you gotten over that feeling of not belonging? Also, how the heck do you still stay awake? I get so sleepy without the stimulants. LOL. PS, love you and your mission, vision, and message. XOXO. Oh, thank you. Well, I'm so sorry that happened to you and has happened to you. But I mean, I do get the comments about the not drinking, but not really even from ravers. It's more so from normies. And like, the one thing that always happens is like whenever I tell someone I'm not drinking, they go into the reasons why they can never give up drinking. And I'm like, you don't need to tell that to me. I'm not like, it's like they think I'm like, I don't even know what to compare it to, but it's like they're confessing to me. And it's like, I'm not judging you. Like, I really don't care why you don't drink. Like, it doesn't matter to me. Like, that's your choice. You know what I mean? Like, I don't get why they feel the need to like confess to me why they can't give up drinking or why they could never give up drinking. Like, I don't really care. Like it's a personal thing to me. I'm not trying to convince you to not drink just by me saying I'm not drinking tonight. Like it's a weird thing that I noticed happened, but not really. Like I don't really notice that from other ravers in my personal experience. But again, like you just have to chalk it up to everyone has their own perception and set of beliefs. And like at the end of the day, you can't control that and you're not responsible for it. And like what people think about you is really none of your business. And you kind of just have to develop this shield around you that no matter what people think about your sobriety or who you are or anything, it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, you know what you're doing and you know what's best for you and you know who you are. And that's what you get about how do you get over that feeling of not belonging is like recognizing like, I'm sure there are other people who are just like you. And a lot of festivals do have sober communities or you might be able to tap into that. And I think that would help you a lot more is surrounding yourself with sober ravers. And you might realize like there's more people than you realize, that you're able to connect with. And again, if someone's judging you for taking that route, that's just their own conditioning and beliefs and everything that they're just projecting onto you. And it's none of your business and you don't really need to adopt that. How do I stay awake? It really is caffeine and then having meals, having snacks. Food is fuel. That's kind of the best thing that I do. And like I said, I time my caffeine. I don't overdo the caffeine. I'm very mindful about how much caffeine I do. And I pick the caffeine too, depending on what it is and what caffeine sources they have available. And I try to keep it minimal, and then also taking breaks and making sure I'm getting enough sleep, taking care of yourself, stuff like that can also be really helpful to help you stay awake. And if needed, flipping your sleep schedule can also be helpful. And then the last two questions. Are you still alcohol free? Do you ever get tempted to drink? Are you going to ever drink again? And so, yeah, I have broken my sobriety. I broke it with Groove Cruise. And right now I'm in a no drinking period. And, for me, it's all about intention, the intention behind it. I wanted to have a drink with my meal on Groove Cruise. I wanted to have, little sips here and there of tequila Red Bull. I wanted to have a drink on the island. Like, it's more so the intention behind it. And like in February, like I spent more time with my coworkers, so it's like stuff like that. And even like, this upcoming festival season, I might drink one of the festival days just to see, maybe as like a little experiment for myself. But I got a lot of festivals to go to, and I don't really want to be hungover. And like, I have my birthday coming up. I'm probably going to do that sober. So I'm doing it very sparingly. And the times I do choose to drink, I'm going to be intentional about it. But like I said, raves and festivals, I really don't feel like I need it. It's more so like social things again, where it's like, if I want to have a glass of wine with my girlfriends, like, yeah, I want to do that, So yeah, I'm not really like back to drinking in the ways that I was, but it's more so intentional. And like right now I'm in a little no drinking period, and we'll kind of see when I do decide to have a drink. That's just kind of how it is. Like I said, my camera is warming up, so I need to wrap up this podcast, but I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you got some learnings and things from it that might support you in your journey if you are thinking about having an alcohol-free festival season or just exploring alcohol-free in general. If you have any questions, let me know. Like I said, I am not the expert at this at all. This was just all from personal experience. So like I said, take what resonates, leave what doesn't. If you did enjoy today's episode, I would love a rating and review. It has been so good to be doing this podcast again and connecting with you all. And if you're watching on YouTube, definitely hit that subscribe button to vibe with me and leave me a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's episode. I love you guys. I hope you have a great rest of your week, a very vibey week. And if you're going to Project Glow, I will see you there. And I will see you guys in the next one. I hope you guys have a very vibey week. Stay vibey, vibey fam. Bye.